Olá a todos, estamos aqui em mais um toque do Teatro São Pedro e hoje o nosso convidado é Ira Levin. Hi Ira, it's nice to talk to you.
Hi Paulo, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Good to see you.
Listen, this is a very unusual way of interviewing people, but it's the way we found to keep our relationships going on. And
yes, absolutely.
It's also an opportunity for our audience to know a little bit more about people that has been part of our productions in the last few years. And you've been an invited guest conductor for three times. Yeah. Unfortunately not for this year, because this year is everything was postponed. But I'm sure that you will come again, not only to work with our Orquestra do Teatro São Pedro, but also with our Youth Orchestra of São Paulo.
Well, gladly.
But I think for the audience it would be nice if we can talk a little bit about your musical trajectory. If you could explain them how you started music, with the piano, because you were very young. You played for Bernstein. We know the story is well known here in Brazil. Tell us a little bit about your musical life.
Well, I didn't start all that young. I was about 9.5, in fact, at least 9 that I know. And according to the family legend, I read a book about Mozart in the school library. Back in those days, they still had books about Mozart in the school library. And I became fascinated that he was composing so young, and I got interested. And I just got interested. And I asked my mom for lessons, and she said no, because she had problems with my brothers. I have 2 older brothers practicing, and I insisted and insisted. And then I began, and it went everything very, very quickly. You know, we had my first teacher would assign me the next 4 songs in the piano course for the following week, and he would come the next week, and I would play him the next 4 books, and you know, this kind of thing. And within about 6 months, I was playing Mozart sonatas, reading through things, and about a year later, I began to compose. You know, using copying Beethoven's manuscripts. Beethoven was my idol, so I got a terrible handwriting, but I mean, I wrote a requiem when I was 11, and my mother said, "What are you writing a requiem for? You're Jewish." I said, "Well, Mozart." But no, so it went very, very quick, and I had was blessed with a really unusual sight reading ability. So, you know, I would just, on my way to lessons, buy a Brahms concerto or whatever, or Liszt or whoever, and just go to the lesson and basically sight read it for the teacher. I was at Northwestern University at age 12. And the teachers there, they didn't know what to do with me, any of them. So when I look back, though, it was very good, because I'm still the same way. I'm very curious about everything, as you know. And my mother never forced me into doing anything. I mean, I played baseball, I went to normal schools, but then at a certain point, it had to get serious. I mean, I knew I was going to be a musician. But then I got a very good teacher at Northwestern University, and then at age 17, went to Indiana University, began working with George Ballet, who of course was one of the great pianists of the 20th century. And after a year, he left for the Curtis Institute of Music and brought me with him. So I was with him for a total of 7 years, and later became his teaching assistant at Curtis. So that was also a great experience, because I was like 20 years old and teaching, you know, some of the most talented younger people in the world. But then I always was composing and studying scores. I always had full scores at home. I would read Wagner scores and Verdi or whatever at the piano, the full scores, even as a kid, train myself to do that. then at a certain point, people started telling me, "Oh, you're going to be a conductor." And I said, "Ah, no, I'm not. I'm just interested in the score." "No, no, you're going to be a conductor." And then Zuben came to Curtis, and I played some rehearsals. He said, "Oh, you're a conductor." And I mean, a lot of people were telling me this. And then Max Rudolph, who was a legendary conducting teacher, he was the head of the Met and was the assistant of Karl Böhm in Darmstadt back in the 1920s. I mean, he knew everyone and heard everyone. And he came back and he wrote the book, Grammar of Conducting, which is still the basic textbook. Yeah, still. So Max came back to Curtis to teach and accepted me in his class. And after that, I mean, I was only with him for about a year, but one of his students was a conductor at the Frankfurt Opera, and he had told her about me. And then out of the blue, I got a call from the Frankfurt Opera in 1984. They needed someone for a new production of The Ring, of all things.
So your premiere was
my first opera, The Ring.
Wagner.
So I auditioned for Michael Gielin, who was the great conductor of the Frankfurt Opera, and at the same time in Cincinnati, the symphony. So I flew to Cincinnati and played the Chopin Fourth Ballade for him in the last 15 minutes or so of Götterdämmerung from the partitura. And he said, "Come." And I mean, I had no opera experience at all. I had rarely even been in the opera, as a visitor. But it was back then, it's hard for people today to understand even what things were like in 1985. I mean, imagine that in my first year, not only did I assist The Ring, I mean, a new production of The Ring. So that went on for 2 years. And I played or conducted or whatever, almost all of the rehearsals. So, I mean, I did almost 500 rehearsals for The Ring or more, probably. I don't know, every day for months and months. But in addition, my first year in Frankfurt, I was involved with 17 other operas. Tales of Hoffmann, lots of Mozart, Die Soldaten of Zimmermann. I conducted the stage music with Ingo Metzmacher, and one of the other assistants of the opera later was Tony Pappano, now Sir Antonio Pappano. But Tony and I were together. We had a talented group of people. But I was learning from all these people, and there were people there from whom you could learn. It wasn't just, the next competition-winning 20-year-old or whatever as a conductor. It was really people. They would send me down and say, "You have to go play a rehearsal of Ballo and Maschera for Giuseppe Pattini." I said, "Oh, I never played it." "Yeah, but you cite everything, so go." I mean, it was like that. That doesn't exist really anymore today. And this kind of training that I had also doesn't exist anymore. Most operas, when I went to Dusseldorf later as principal conductor, we had 45 operas in the repertoire. So when people read that I've conducted whatever, 95 operas and 1,200, 1,300 performances, they go, "Oh, that can't be it." Yes, it's absolutely normal. It was normal for me after I became established as a conductor that I went from Frankfurt to Bremen. I was 28 years old. I went to Bremen as principal conductor, was there for 8 years. Then I went to Dusseldorf. I was there for 6 years. And, I mean, conducted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of staging rehearsals and orchestra rehearsals and performances, and would average 60 to 70 performances a year. So, I mean, to reach 1,000 performances is nothing, Anyway, so the conducting took over, but I never stopped my activities as a pianist. As you know, I made CDs. One of them even won the Carlos Gomez Award here in Brazil in 2007, which used to be an award for best classical CD of the year. I published 35 piano transcriptions. Then I started making orchestrations. Orchestrations of piano and chamber works, Reger and Busoni and Cesar Franck and Rachmaninoff. Some of our public has maybe heard some of them. My Reger orchestration of the Bach variations. My orchestration of the Reger Bach variations is out on Naxos, also on YouTube. And, so I've always been much more than just a conductor and always much more than just a pianist, you know, and that in a way makes this crisis for me easier to deal with, because I'm never bored. You know, I'm thinking now about making. I was just speaking to Andre Heller, the artistic director in Rio, where I'm the music director, about making a potential reduction for a group of 12 players for certain operas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, so I'm always active. I revised some things this week that I had published before. So yeah, so that's basically the type of musician I've always been. And then I got the call in 2001 asking if I was interested in going to the Teatro Municipal in São Paulo as music director.
Was it your first time in Brazil? Or
yes.
You've been here before?
Yeah, I must confess, very little notion of Brazil at the time. I just, when that call came inquiring whether I was interested or not, it was from Marco Aurelio Garcia, who was the Secretary of Culture at the time. I immediately said yes, because I was interested after 18 years of doing regie theater and doing so many productions and performances without rehearsals, and you know, doing 9 performances of Rosenkavalier and having 8 casts in Düsseldorf, you know, like that kind of thing. After a certain point, after you know you can do it, or can you conduct Tristan tomorrow without a rehearsal? Sure. Or Frauen Schatten? Sure. But you know, after a while, after you've done that, you've done that. It's not a challenge. And I had things in my personal life. Most of my friends know that I have a child with severe brain damage, and the years in Germany were very difficult. After she was born in 1990, she's still alive. She's now 30, which is amazing. But anyway, so I had a lot of things on my plate in Germany. So when the call came from Brazil, I went, yes. I didn't know, you know, my notion of Brazil was like any kind of ignorant foreigner, you know, land of beautiful, whatever, gorgeous landscapes and, you know, women and this and that. And the first thing I saw when I arrived was the Marginal.
In São Paulo.
Wait, there's no one here walking around with, you know, fruit on their head or whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but I was really ready for a change, you know. So then I came to Brazil. I got the job at the end of 2001. After the second rehearsal, they invited me already to be. They didn't even wait for the concert, and the dress rehearsal for my first concert was on 9/11. So I mean.
Wow.
My experience in Brazil began and continued until today with very extreme situations. You know, it was never normal. It was never boring. You know, and I was so I got the job, and then I was at the Municipal for 3 years, and then left. Politics changed and all that, and then was at Brasilia, and then I went back to Germany. But then I got a call from the Teatro Cologne to do a Lohengrin, and after the Lohengrin, they made me principal conductor there. So I was principal guest conductor at Teatro Cologne in Buenos Aires. I did 12 operas there, and a lot of concerts, and some very interesting operas like Oedipe, Georgianesco, and Frauen Schatten, Strauss, and Rachmaninoff operas, Caligula by Detlef Glanert, Idomeneo. I mean, you know, it was the whole spectrum. And then I was at City Opera in New York, and then I last year surprisingly got the call to come to Rio de Janeiro. And before that, I had some very wonderful experiences working in São Paulo at the Teatro San Pedro. Doing, I remember the first time you called me, and you said we would like to have you. I said, oh, that's nice. And what would you like to do? And I said, Busoni Arlecchino. And you said, great. What else? And I said, Pulcinella. Great. Okay, and that's what we did.
Yes, the double bill was
probably our very first conversation.
Yeah.
So I mean, the work with all of you at San Pedro was very enjoyable for me. And now in Rio. So we still have our apartment in Berlin, but I'm obviously most of the year in Rio now. We're trying to decide with all this chaos going on what exactly to do. If we actually bought an apartment in Rio, but who knows now what's going on with everything. So that's basically in a nutshell what I've been doing the last 61 years
of your life.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the first production we did together at Teatro San Pedro with Stravinsky and Busoni. I remember the first time we talked, we've explained that the orchestra was not a big one.
Yes.
And I explained to you that I really didn't want to do the 19th century repertoire, the big orchestral repertoire, because it didn't fit at the teatro.
No.
And it was also an opportunity for the teatro to do Baroque opera and 20th century opera that was not usual.
I asked many times over the years, of course, people would ask my opinion with my experience, what to do about Teatro San Pedro, which I had never actually even been in, but before I came to work there with you. And I said from the beginning, with all due respect to my colleagues there, I think it's a mistake for the Teatro San Pedro to be basically doing the repertoire of the Municipal.
Yeah.
The Municipal is the place for the big 19th century titles, for all that acoustically as well. And, why not use that space? Exactly what you're talking about. Baroque, classic, Gluck, Mozart, and whoever else. And of course, 20th century works. There are so many interesting works, and also acoustically. Even when I discussed the Janacek cycle with you and with Andre, part of my thought was that even the sound of these works is not string oriented. It's a harder, sharper sound that's more conducive to a hall like that than something there where you really want a violin section of 10 or 12 first violins or a minimum. That's also among the works that I'm considering reducing now would be perhaps Janacek, because to do a Verdi opera or Carmen or a Wagner, with a piano and a couple of winds is ridiculous. But 20th century things work quite well. So I thought that the conditions you were offering were, and the repertoire that we were discussing, with 1,000 ideas, was absolutely the proper thing to do for that particular theater.
And what do you think about the acoustics for the singers also? Because we can think about the orchestra, but for the singers, the Teatro San Pedro is also very generous in terms of projection.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think you can, because of that, because of the acoustic, it's quite beneficial. So and of course, in a hall of that size, one gets the impression. We basically did the full Janacek orchestration. I just had reduced strings, but in a hall of that size, the 7 or 8 violins sound much more, than in a hall of 2,040. It would be impossible to do that. 2,400 to do that in Rio at Teatro Colón. But so I think that's a perfect hall for a specific repertoire, but again, not 19th century things, apart from a few maybe some couple French things or something, but not the big choral opera. You don't even have space for a chorus there.
The backstage is it almost doesn't exist.
That's why we're Janacek also, because there's no chorus basically. Yeah.
And what do you think about your experience? You experienced conducting the Teatro Municipal in the early 2000s, and later almost 20 years later, you came to conduct the Orquestra do Teatro São Pedro, and last year we've invited you to conduct the youth orchestra, the São Paulo Youth Orchestra. What do you think about the musical level of the country and the level of the musicians as well as the singers?
Well, I think that the level in general, like everywhere, has improved a lot. You know, I would say the experiences I've had in Brazil, there were two main problems: infrastructure, or the lack thereof, and political changes. You know, because it happened to me, and it's happened to all of my colleagues, it's happened to all of us. Those who are capable of doing something in these organizations, not all are or have been, but the moment things get moving, get going in a positive direction, that doesn't mean that it has to be in a direction everyone agrees upon, you know, but things are moving. Then there's a change of the government, and they come in and put in their friends or whatever, and everything changes again. So you basically have one season of transition, and you have 2 seasons of work. I think I came in the second season of that gestão of São Paulo, yeah. And then the last season is basically everyone waiting to see what's going to happen in the election. So this was all incredibly frustrating. And the lack of a proper infrastructure, you know. When I came to Brazil, they basically gave me a mandate to change things. And you know me, and the musicians know me. I mean, I'm tough. I don't compromise. But back then I was a lot tougher, you know, and I've become a little wiser now, but and more relaxed. But you know, I saw what needed to be done, and I thought, my God, this is like being in Italy in 1895. I mean, the orchestra would come in, you know, 15 minutes late to rehearsal. They would come unprepared. They would this, and I found myself having like almost these, like almost Toscanini-like fits. You know, like, what is this? What planet am I on? That musicians are strolling in at 20 minutes after the beginning of the rehearsal, or a player who I said, you should learn your part by tomorrow, or you're going to have problems, would come to me after the rehearsal and squeeze my cheek and say, você é muito fofinho. And I say, no. You know, all these kind of surreal things going on. And I remember a huge outburst I had because the strings weren't prepared for Leonore 2, which they didn't know. You know, no one really plays that overture too much out of the 3, Leonore. And so I would get really upset because I still do a lot of idealism, and I wanted to change things. So I changed things, but of course, a lot of people hated me for that. But you know, c'est la vie. You can't, if you're conducting, worry about everyone liking you. But no one actually sat down with me and said, listen, this is what we're like. If you tell someone that their intonation is not good, they'll think you don't like them. If you do this, they'll think you know, and so on. So after all those years, and Brasilia and Teatro Colón, you know, now I know a few things, I think, which is helping in Rio. But in any case, so that was a shock to me, and I didn't have a team. You know, when I went back to the municipal in 2014, when John was there, initially, you know, they had an infrastructure. I had people running around and doing things. So I said, my God, you know, I didn't have any of that, nothing. I didn't have an assistant. I didn't have anything. So it was basically Ira and his kind of demonic energy, you know, doing all these things. And then we did get things going, you know, and then the politics changed and I was out. And basically the same kind of thing in Brasilia. There were other things in Brasilia involved, but I mean, you know, basically the same scenario. We took the Brasilia orchestra after 6 months to Campos do Jordão. People were saying that was the best orchestra of the summer. And we played a Haydn symphony, which no one ever did, because it means more work, not less work, than doing Tchaikovsky 5 or Mahler 5, you know? And so, you know, this was something that I did. I, you know, call Ira, he'll change the plays. That's what the governor in Brasilia said at the time. And I didn't want to go. He said, no, please, we know what you did in Sao Paulo. Okay. I don't think today that that's really so necessary, you know, because you arrive at the rehearsals today, like for instance, with Teatro São Pedro, and they're prepared. You know, I mean, of course I had to work, but there was none of this nonsense, you know, going on. Like, my God, you know, can you at least spend 5 minutes at home looking at this passage? I mean, they were basically prepared. And we did the Busoni and Stravinsky, which was quite good, you know. And then I thought that the Janacek, Katya, and then the Makropoulos were kind of quantum leaps, you know. And when I was completely bowled over when I heard the youth orchestra, Claudio conducting the youth orchestra during, I think, 2017, Mahler's second, and I told you I want to conduct them. I mean, you know, they played Mahler's second. I must say this, much better than the Municipal did for me 18 years before, or 17 years before, 16 years before. You know, this is not. I'm not hearing this. This is unbelievable. And my experience last October with them, that was really one of the most enjoyable concerts I've ever had. And I think the feeling was mutual. I mean, it was, you know, I've gotten so many letters from the players that was the best concert I ever played. I mean, Claudio's done a great job there, and you. And I thought, well, you know, this is something that didn't exist in my time. If I had had that kind of infrastructure and all that, I would have turned the Municipal into a, you know, internationally important house. I mean, I'm not saying it's not important, but I mean, let's face it. You know, it's not what, when I say internationally important, it's not what I mean by that. And but now that there are conditions. Also, when I went back to the Municipal in 2014 to do 2 operas, and I mean, the level of the orchestra was, you know, much better in many ways. Some of the older players were still there, you know, and good players. But I mean, in general, the attitude was different. So my that's my conviction that in general, the level has gone up. But my concern, we talked about this several times, and we talked about this before this horrendous tragedy of the corona. My concern was, where are all of these talented young people, for instance, going to go? What's the next step? Because even before the corona, the music scene was suffering greatly. We all had artistic crises and cuts, also in Germany and in other places. Organizations in trouble, many of them corrupt financially, and also, I would venture to say, spiritually. Yeah, sick spiritually. And, you know, and then this virus came. So, I mean, it on one hand made things 1,000 times worse, because if there was danger before, the fear of where people are going to go after the youth orchestra or whatever, after Teatro São Pedro, maybe some of them would like to try for other bigger orchestras. What's going to be the case now? You know? But my story in Brazil is basically that, experiencing this rise, this improvement, you know, of the level. So I'm, of course, concerned, but also going to do everything I can. I've spoken to many people, and not just with Andre and Rio and you, but I mean other people who have approached me about, you know, what to do, how to go on, how to do this and that. The other problem is that, and how shall I put it? I'll be a little polemic here, which I don't care.
It's okay.
We all have our egos, yeah, and our ambitions. But I don't, there have been many times where I've had projects or ideas, let's get together, let's do this together, let's do the co-productions, already going back to Sao Paulo and Rio, let's do this. And then, it sounds all great on paper, idealistic and all that. And then when it comes to the point of doing it, then there's egos get in the way. The one doesn't want someone else to get the credit, or doesn't want to be, or, that's also difficult. I'm not saying that doesn't exist elsewhere, of course, but it is a lot easier to get things going among different houses, let's say, in Germany than it was here, and that's something which there are attempts to change that, meetings and all of that, but I see very little fruit, and I think this is really a time where the petty egos have to be set aside a bit, and the organizations have to be thought about, the institutions. It's not about Paulo or Ira or whoever. It's about what the hell's going to happen to these kids, or be there for them in 20 years. What's going to happen to the institutions that are well established, firmly established, that are now facing a huge existential threat. So I'm basically doing my thing here as much as I can musically, and waiting to see. Also with the Teatro Municipal in Rio, we're planning things, but we don't really know. We've made, I don't know how many temporadas for this year. Plan A to X, but no one really knows. And there are all these health conditions that have to be met for obvious reasons. But I would like to be involved in something creative, and not just be fretting because I can't go back and conduct another performance of the Beethoven Fifth. It doesn't really matter to me at the moment. Also, these pieces that just go back in business as usual and conduct the same standard repertoire that we've been hearing for, ad nauseum. So, we have to see what develops,